Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whenever you happenstance to this cool truth bomb riff on Patrick Lovell's Truth Bombs the Con. And I am joined by my longtime colleague, one of my favorite people that walks on this planet, a guy by the name of Eric S. Vaughan. And we're recording this on, I guess it's Tuesday, May 20th, Taco Tuesday, 2025 at approximately 1 o'clock my time. Now, this is intriguing to me because we've spent so much time on the phone, so much time together in very small spaces over the course of literally, I think, what is approaching 15 years or so, working together and all sorts of stuff. But I'd like to welcome you, which is kind of funny, to my podcast. But we've been kind of joined at the hip for years now, and it's really kind of an exciting time to be introducing what you're now in the midst of, which I can't wait to unpack in context everything that's going on. But I'll introduce the name of it shortly. But I want to start with a couple of things to kind of give us kind of a view into your world at the moment, as I can see, of course, some of the best posters of Star Wars behind you. May
I'm
the
Star Wars out today.
Outstanding, outstanding. As millions of people are tuned into Andor and the Resistance, given what you and I have been in the midst of for a very long time, you know, Eric, everybody has a come from. I'm going to ask an open-ended question to start, but what is your come from, my man?
Oh boy. It sounds benign, but that is a loaded question, as well most are with me. So, well, boy, what is my come from? So, all right. Um, I've made this joke before. I think the first time I made it was with you, probably in one of those car drives across country, where I say that every part of who I am has somehow been attacked or screwed or otherwise dumped upon by the man, as it were. So I joke how it's like, okay, so I'm Mexican. I have Japanese American in me, and it's not just Japanese American. It's like I'm a descendant of somebody who was at an internment camp, um, and there's like a whole story, with that as well. I also have Native American, and so everybody, that's pretty well documented, and so it's like, yeah, you could say that it's just sort of like my genetic heritage. To be fighting the impossible fight against impossible odds against the much larger, much more powerful forces that be. so, so I guess it's no surprise that I am where I am and doing what I'm doing.
Well, that's a great introduction because I've always thought of you, especially since I got to know you as a Jedi. But that's one facet of your character. But really, Eric, it's funny as you kind of laid that out. One thing that I learned a long time ago was that people really didn't know exactly how to perceive you initially, especially those of us who worked with you. And we started our career, well, we started our careers long ago, long before we met each other. But we met each other on a particular television show. And I remember you walking in my life for the first time. And the first thing that popped into my mind, because I come from X Gen rock and roll, punk rock, like, lifestyle and all that sort of thing. And you had this really cool, long, glorious hair and those, black fingernails. And I looked at you and I thought to myself, man, that's Ian Astbury from the Cult, which is one of my favorite bands of all time. So immediately I kind of put you in a really cool light. But what I had learned throughout our journeys together is everybody thought you were Johnny Depp, which is really cool as well, right? And so here are these things where people tend to perceive us by our looks, our heritage, what they learn about us as we kind of move forward. What does that kind of say to you in terms of your sort of lifelong journey? What is kind of the qualifier, if you will, of perception?
You know what? That's an interesting question, because it's always been. I have one of those faces that people like just think look like somebody else. It's like whether it's Ian Astbury or Johnny Depp, or when I was younger, I used to get a Dave Navarro a lot.
Right on.
And and so I think that it's just like one of those things. Now, what's also really interesting to me is that, especially I've noticed this out here in Ohio, where I think most people think ethnic that ethnic minorities and stuff like that, that it's basically, I think people just think very much black or white. And me being Mexican, Japanese, Native American, and whatever else is in there. People never. I don't think anybody really knew where to place me, so I just get defaulted into white. Oh, you're just a weird white guy, but you're a white guy or something like that. So I don't know. It's kind of strange, but it also kind of harkens back to something that my dad said when I was kind of first confronting prejudice in a couple of different ways when I was a kid. And he would say, "You're only minority if you think you are." And so, I think that that's an oversimplification, to be perfectly honest, but I understood why he said that. He was trying to give me, a place to be grounded, a place to where it's like, if they're using it as a put down, it's not. You can't be put down by something that you're not in your head. And so I understood the utility of it, even though if I think about it, too deeply, I think that there's like some, inaccuracies about it, but I understood the motive behind it, and it's always something that's kind of stuck with me, where it's like, I'm not going to ever allow myself to be a victim. It's like I'm always gonna dig my heels in. I'm always gonna fight, and I do it my own way. It's like, I'm not necessarily the big demonstrable guy. In a lot of ways, I think that we both have that fighting spirit, but it just comes out in remarkably different ways, and so it's always been an interesting thing, I suppose.
Well, absolutely. You qualified that in a very, I think, appropriate way, considering what it is I'm hoping to kind of fully express in this dialogue, because the audience is just now going to start getting to know us in ways that maybe they haven't yet, even though we've been on this incredible journey for a long time. And when you first walked into my life, we were working on a television show at a production company where we were giving away houses, but telling these incredible stories in the midst of us on this, in the midst of that, on a nationally syndicated television show where we were traveling around the country, finding really terrific stories to make the audience feel good, but baked into this sort of giving away a house. And it's that kind of standard bearer of what was acceptable on television then, and quite frankly now. And our job was just to tell really good stories and to make sure that we were able to execute that. And the first thing that I remember thinking about, besides when you walked into my life and I kind of had that specific sort of come from, but as we started to get to know each other, I was just really blown away by your writing. And so as I got to know you a little bit better, I learned that you had gone to USC in the creative writing program, and we had both lived in Los Angeles, and we had been pursuing film and television and creative stuff for a long time. And you had worked with some heavies as well in our neck of the woods. And but what I fully embraced initially was your ability to tell magnificent stories and incredible through lines. And I wonder if you could just kind of off the top, tell me where that inspiration came from, that drive, that determination to become a really qualified writer.
Something, when I was in, actually, well, if I go way back, it goes all the way back to grade school. So I remember in grade school, so back in this was in the early 80s, not to date myself, but and I'd gotten this assignment in Ms. Wallen's, it was fourth grade, and is Ms. Wallen's class, and we were supposed to write like a story of some sort. I can't remember the exact, what the exact, assignment was. But what I do remember is that I was really into Raiders of the Lost Ark at that moment in time. And so it's sort of like there was a period of time where it was Star Wars and then Raiders would kind of like, it was like one summer it was a Star Wars movie, next summer it was a Raiders, it was an Indiana Jones movie, then Star Wars again, then Indiana Jones again. And so it was kind of in the midst of that. And one of the and this was like when Raiders came out. And so Raiders was like all in my head, and so I ended up writing like this thing, which was sort of like I guess you would say it was either an extension of or a sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, where I was following like the kind of the continued adventure of the Ark. It's like the Ark gets loaded on a ship again and goes someplace, and I don't remember the story entirely, but I just remember feeling like, oh wow, this is it. This is it. This is so what I want to do. I want to be a writer. And so for years and years and years, that's where I like pointed my ship. It's like, okay, you are going to be a screenwriter. And so that's kind of how I sort of initially got into that, and then I just kind of kept reinforcing that all through high school, and then my decision to go to USC was because I wanted to take part in the film school there. And it was just one of those things where one of my first classes that I ever had in college, it was a screenwriting class, and they had like the very first day they put in this video, they had like the thing they will in, and they have put in the tape, and it was Billy Wilder was talking about scripts, and was talking about how scripts should be scripts are more akin to poetry than prose or novel writing, and that they're meant to be read aloud, and that they're meant to be read again and again, and that they should have that the sense of timing and beat and meter and so on and so forth makes it more poem like than like some of these other forms of writing. And it was right about that same time that I came into the understanding that T.C. Boyle was the head of the creative writing program at USC, and he was like he was this author that I had only recently been introduced to as far as like his writing was concerned, but I loved his writing, especially like the Tortilla Curtain, which is one of my favorite books of all time, and that spoke to me in so many different ways, and it's just like, okay, well, maybe filmic writing isn't the path for me. Maybe what I need to do is explore like creative writing in general and have that be my path, and then like really kind of learn the craft over here, and then apply what I learned in storycraft from the creative writing program to film. And that's ultimately kind of how I approached it, and what I did. So I guess you could go back to that for sure. And there was a period of time also where I was playing with the idea of going into journalism, because USC had a really strong journalism school. And so I think that kind of when you put that into the mix, or it's like, oh man, maybe I want to do journalism. It's like, okay, if I'm going to do like all these other forms of writing, said, but you know what, film is where it's at for me. I guess ultimately it all made sense because I mean, here I am. It's like I documentaries is my jam, and that kind of seems like that is the proper and synthesis of those three things. And so
Well, the reason I'm smiling this whole time is because I literally thought I knew everything about you. And what's so cool about hearing that, considering, of course, we're both Pac-10/Pac-12 guys, so fight on, and everything that goes with that, because anybody who's ever aspired to film and, cinematography and all of the other arts within the film community certainly understands the power of USC. But I really found that intriguing specifically as it related to Indiana Jones, because as you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark is my favorite film of all time. But I also minored in journalism at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University. I majored in political science and minored in journalism. But so we both had that interesting come from, because it's interesting as our sort of friendship bonded and our professional friendship bonded. We went through a lot of really amazing things working together that spanned both the television show that I prefaced, which led us to understand a lot of things that we would learn later in our development, but also We did some independent projects together, and immediately I had discovered that you were this guy that seemed to be able to do a lot of things, and which blew my mind because as we were coming out of larger budgets in production, and we were kind of used to sort of those sort of vertical studio type of projects, there was this transition to all things online, which then really lowered the production costs. But yet there was an expectation of production value. And what I had immediately discovered was that you had this ability, this uncanny ability to do like more things that I ever could possibly imagine. I was like, my God, talking about the Jedi skill and, bouncing around from one situation to another. So you could always wear like two or three hats at the same time. And what launched us on our journey that's going to be relevant to why we're talking today and why this isn't so important in terms of our, I think, laying the groundwork for hopefully what people will come to understand is why we came together and what we came together to do. But I had gone, as we both well know, but we were right in the midst of it. My life got torpedoed. Everybody's lives got torpedoed, but mine a little bit more so than yours, considering I was early in the family and I was into a new house. And
I lucked out because I had just gotten out of the housing market just before the crash.
there you go.
So yeah.
There you go. And so what happened was I was looking for answers based on all of these things that were just really, um, befuddling me. And as somebody with a journalistic background and an interest in how things work, suddenly I was at this moment where it's like, okay, something's not adding up here. And what I'm referring to is the aftermath of the 2008 great financial crisis.
Right.
And one thing led to another. I started to set out to try to figure out what was going on in my life that didn't add up. And so I thought maybe we could try to figure out a way to create a documentary film. And so one thing led to another, and there was somebody in my neighborhood. I'm not going to preface his name right now. I should say in my community, but somebody who I thought was a very thoughtful guy. He was, very thorough in his understanding that I had experienced about how things work. And so I had approached him with this idea because you and I were developing a lot of projects at the time anyway, because of just the nature of our business and what happened in the aftermath of the 2008 great financial crisis. But I had approached this gentleman and I had asked him to consider championing a project where we could go on sort of a investigation and a mission to find out what the heck was going on in our country. And I immediately started opening up dialogue with you. And what was so mind blowing is because as a producer myself, I knew how to put things together and get everything up to scale and to a degree, pretty decent budgets, but not at the level that I suddenly determined or came to understand what you were capable of. And this goes into this notion of, wow, Eric can wear a lot of different hats. And so I went to this person and I asked him, hey, I don't feel like I'm expendable. And I would like to find out exactly what seems to be the problem with our country. And his response was, after some dialogue, not too much dialogue, quite frankly, all things considered. And he had said to me, and he had asked me, and he said, if you can figure out how we went of, by, and for the people to of, by, and for the corruption, I'm in. And I was like, holy cow. The first call I made was to you. And I said, Eric, and we both were watching this because again, just for, everybody watching this, Eric and I had been pretty much in communication every day about many different projects that we were developing and in the process of trying to get funded. But the problem with the timing was money had basically dried up because of the aftermath of the 2000 great financial crisis. And so somebody like myself, who's kind of a business oriented guy, who knows how to find budgets and clients and that sort of thing. And that's kind of where I fall in on the production side. I reached out to Eric and I said, hey man, it looks like this Occupy Wall Street movement is about to kick off. Do you think you could put the budget together and help me craft what the story might be? And you did two things right away, Eric. The first thing is, and probably the most important thing is, you put together a budget that works. And I was about to do the other one, but that worked. But the second thing you did, which was equally profound to me at the time, and I swear to God, I think about this pretty much every day, dude. It blows my mind when I consider this based on what we covered in terms of your writing and your ability to craft things in such a poetic and important manner. You set the table for what it was we were going to do by writing an essay you titled The New Aristocracy. And you kind of bring those two things together and try to inform me about like how you were reacting to what it was that I proposed, and then how you immediately grasped what it was that we were kind of on a mission to try to find, even though we didn't fully understand it at the time.
Well, I mean, the whole world was sort of like in the same stew. I mean, the sky was falling. For people who weren't alive back then or were too young to really realize what was happening. I mean, it was a scary, scary time. There were so many people who were screaming the apocalypse is nigh, I wasn't as well steeped into some of the things that we later find out, to understand that, okay, maybe, there was maybe there's a different story here. But it was something where it's like you said, I mean, so much was happening, and there was so much just crazy, just it was just a scary time, and in so many different stories and so many things that you grab them and they don't fit, and then you come and you tell me your personal story, and once again it doesn't fit. And so it was just like my first attempt at really synthesizing, what's going on out there, and grabbing all these different things and saying, okay, what is this about? And so it was more of a personal statement to ground me, but I also felt that it was important to share that with you and our new partner, at the time, to understand where I was coming from. And I think that that particular piece, I don't know if I really had the ability to appreciate just how on target, and in some cases prophetic, that piece was. And I'm hoping to share a slightly revised version of that piece very soon. Dug it up, and I think that there's some stuff I'm going to add to, I'll share it, and I'll make sure that you're able to share it as well, because I do think that it was really a critically important piece for me to get in the right headspace, and for me to begin the synthesis of taking all these desperate stories and all these, and all these facts that didn't seem to match the narratives that we were hearing, and saying, okay, this is what this is about, and let's move on to this journey, on the right foot.
But as you established earlier, you had this really unique background that had a lot of pieces of the puzzle of people that had, in your words, been shat upon. And you had this sort of come from, but yet you had a very courageous sort of outlook that you would not be defined by all of those unfortunate realities, right? You would overcome those. But in your synthesis of that, and what struck me then, and what's so prophetic is that it's as true today as it was when you wrote it, you identified a power structure. You identified a power structure that fomented the notion of imperialism, of smash and grab, sort of rape and pillage of central power, and towards what ends. And you deconstructed all of those elements. And so, in some capacity, I was reading a history paper, but at the same time, and this was what was so, again, prophetic, was that it just seemed to be a roadmap to what it was that we were about to uncover. And neither of us, I think, anticipated that.
All right. So, like, one of the things, and I think this is like one of the ways that we, work so well together, is that I took the information and I kind of created an image where it's like, I think this is what the monster is. And then here comes you. Got it. That's the monster. Let's go get it. And then you would just, and then from that point on, it's like you were a ballistic missile homing in on its target. And you've been that way ever since. You were that way before, just as a natural, matter of how you are with things. But I think that at that time, we were all struggling to figure out, well, what are we going after? It's like, who's really the shadow, behind all this? And I think that I created sort of like this I don't know, just this potential image of what that thing might be, not realizing until much later just how accurate that for lack of a better term, prediction was. And thank God, because if it was wrong, I mean, you still would have been going at it, going after it with the same zeal. And so thank God I identified the right bad guy. So because otherwise the poor sap that you would have been attacking, that you would have been taking down this whole time, might have been digging in the wrong place, as it were. A little bit of luck there, but that's the whole thing, right? I mean, when you get on it, when you're, what's it called, when a dog is like, you know
Won't let
sniffing
go
the
of the bone.
path, whatever, it's like, man, you do not let up, and you haven't, you not this entire time, like, from the moment that you decided that you were going to go and try to see, what was the cause of all this. You have been just laser focused on it, and thank God. Honestly,
Yeah,
I profoundly appreciate the fact that you have not never stopped. Your tenacity is second to none. So,
well, that's so kind of you, and I deeply appreciate that. But in the Mutual Admiration Society here, really, the
right.
the honor is all mine because what I had set up earlier, and what I want people to try to get an understanding of is that Eric Vaughan, and I am not kidding when I say this, is one of the most talented people that exists, for sure, that I've ever met. And I've met a lot. I've interviewed Robert Redford. I've interviewed Meryl Streep. I've interviewed, Metallica and the Grateful Dead. I could go on and on and on. I've been around some very incredibly talented people, and Eric Vaughan is by far at the top of the list. And it really stems from this for me. Okay. Reality, budget, wanting to take on what would become the biggest story of our lifetimes and ever since, which controls everything today. But we'll get to that point. But to be able to do that, here comes Eric Vaughan with all of these talents that I've laid out before. But immediately I asked him to do the impossible. In this process, in our first effort with a film called Forward 13, Waking Up the American Dream, which I find incredibly brilliant at this stage in terms of the marketing, because the poster, and I think I might put that down in the link, but it has the Statue of Liberty with a for sale sign. And during the recent protests that we call hashtag 5051 or hands off and soon to be no kings, that brought millions of people to the streets because of what's been going on with this Trump disaster. But I had seen so many posters reflecting the same thing. And so when we started to go off on this adventure, which now is 13 years ago, okay, we've been in the trenches on this daily for 13 years. And the first thing I asked you to do, besides get the budget, was, do you think you might be able to shoot this? And what that meant was that Eric had to not only be available, the two of us got in his car and drove across the entire country, surfing the Occupy Wall Street movement, in which we traveled 7,500 miles together, 24/7, working on a relatively small budget where you would have to shoot. And in the end of the day, after I was just laying on so many interviews, because I was producing like a madman trying to figure out what all of this stuff was, right? Because I thought we might only have one shot at this stuff. And at the same time, I was trying to understand what the hell I went through, right? So it's kind of like this detective mystery. And then we have the supporting character and cast of literally hundreds of thousands of people that were coming to the streets that are basically asking the same questions we were. But here we were trying to suss all of that out, and of course, thank God we had the resources and the commitment to do it by the person that we've alluded to. But we really started figuring some things out that were unbelievable, and it was lasting, I want to say, 18 to 20 hours a day. Because when I got home and started making phone calls and emails, meaning in our car to a hotel wherever we were resting in between all of this stuff,
Right, right.
you were digitizing and you were doing all the technical stuff to be able to provide us the opportunity to actually have a product that was worthwhile. And you were one guy. one, one guy. Tell us what it was like to have to, withstand that ordeal. And, not just the hard work that we did, but me in my nonstop jabbering. The funny thing about this conversation, even though I'm talking more than I'd like to at this moment, this is the focus of you, where you're driving this thing, which is a kind of a role reversal of what we've been doing for the last
Right.
years.
Well, I tell you, I don't know if I thought much about it, right? I mean, I was, we were locked in. We were locked in. It's like, okay, we have a little bit of money to go and try to tell this story. All this stuff is happening all around us, and so the story was there to be taken, right? And so it was just like, you do what you have to do. It's like you make sure that the audio equipment's like running properly, you make sure you have all the batteries, you make sure that the camera's got everything that it needs, and yada yada yada. I remember it's like we bought, like, I think it was like a first generation Drobo, to put it all in. So we had like this black box, this magical black box, that I set up as a RAID, and I'd never done that before, because I you need to make sure that the data was protected and blah 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 blah. And so it was just like, okay, and you know what, it became a microcosm of my entire life, because it's very much what is the issue at hand, what needs to be handled right now, and then you get that done. Then it's like, okay, what's the next thing? And then eventually you get to a point where it's like, okay, batteries are charging, everything is offloading, we've discussed all the things that we're going to discuss, and okay, I guess I'll get some sleep now. And so, and so I think it was just sort of like just a heavily concentrated version of just what I think my normal everyday come from is, which is just like, there's a million things that need to be handled, but I can only handle the thing that's in front of me. So I'll just keep handling the things that are in front of me until I have to get some sleep or get it done or whatever the thing is. I know I'm not going to finish everything, so just keep going, keep going, keep going. And and we were so dogged in our pursuit of this. It's like, I remember we got my wife involved, and I think she landed us a couple of really great key interviews and
Absolutely.
stuff like that. And then you were on the phone, like you wake up and you were either doing emails, on the phone, or something along those lines. And then we would talk, and we'd be talking constantly about, okay, what's next, what are the pieces that are coming together, what's being fit in here, what are we witnessing, what are we seeing, and we're discussing all these things. And so it's just like, from every waking moment during that time was just active and pressing forward, with everything that we have. Because I mean, by the time we were done shooting, yeah, I was exhausted. I was completely exhausted. And I don't remember how long I took to recover, but I know it wasn't that long before, going through and experiencing everything that we experienced. It's like, I get back, and we were starting to get the post production organized, and you were taking care of that. And so I needed to do something. And so that's when Chris and I went and joined Occupy Canton, and really helped to kind of invigorate that. And then we became, because of the experience of going on this, we became activists through and through. It wasn't my first experience in activism, but certainly it was probably, one of the most, I don't know, important, maybe, gratifying, because we got a lot done, like we did some things that we're very proud of. And so I think that I wanted to keep the energy of the shoot alive by then taking part in the very thing that I'd grown to admire by filming it. And so, and so yeah, I mean, I think that just all that sort of metabolism, that was going on during the shoot, I think I just poured into Occupy Canton.
Well, the words can't really express. I mean, I think we've done a pretty decent job of it, but the amount of effort that we put into this, I mean, you said we gave it our all, but we literally gave it our all. We laid it all on the field. that brought in so many memories that I wish we could go into, but I
And
want
still
to,
are. That's the great
well,
thing.
and that's the point because hopefully one day we'll be able to bridge further some of the details of that because what we had learned on that journey during our first lap of what we've been in the midst of for 13 years is literally everything that's going on now. And we've learned so much about the nature of power, about the nature of corruption, but it was prologue to what we would follow up with, which became really, I think, our signature effort, which became what we entitled the Con. That's available currently
Yeah,
at
absolutely.
thecon.tv. But those who watch this podcast, they know that I'm the producer of the Con and that we've put it out there, and many have seen it, and the eyeballs are growing on that, and we've got more to come. However, what I like to say about that, because our mission led us to discovery, and that discovery was created through an investigation. But what we didn't realize through this dogged determination that we were both in the midst of, that of course we got the resources to do, we're very, very fortunate to do it. But we would come to understand that the entire network of our federal government, particularly as it relates to the infrastructure in our institutions that are responsible for doing ultimately the work that we had to do, we had to carry it forward because they failed miserably, which has led to this absolute implosion in this disaster that we're in the midst of, which is now leading to what you're going to be championing and what we need everybody to get their eyeballs on. We have a new effort. You are going to be the face of it. It's going to be a turnaround. It's not me. It's Eric S. Vaughan, and justifiably so, called Corruption Incorporated. Can you tell us what that is and kind of what we should understand as this thing is starting to build momentum?
Well, let's see. I think that one of the things that I wanted to that I would preface this by is that what we're doing is basically, in some ways, I'll put it this way, bringing in reinforcements to what you've been doing for the last several years, right? You've been out there. Once again, that dogged determination. That's just part and parcel of who you are. And with and with this channel right now, and with the Clean New Deal and everything else that you're doing, I think that we'll call it like a second prong to this particular attack, shall we say. We're creating basically an online ecosystem, where I'll be discussing with people, a lot of very familiar faces to your audience, for sure, and a couple new faces that hopefully we'll be able to bring, in back and forth, and we're trying to get the word out on the corrosive nature of corruption, no matter where it comes from. Now, I mean, I have to admit, if I'm watching most of my own stuff that's out there at this point in time, it does seem like we're very, very, anti-Trump, and it's not just because it's Trump. It's just that he happens to be the president in this particular, moment in time, and the things that he's doing just happen to be mammothly corrupt. But what I always like to remind people, when I'm kind of entering into this conversation, is that you watch the con, our big opus about the con, and it's the Obama administration that we're completely tearing apart, for good reason, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, it's as destructive to not do things, which I think is kind of the story of the Obama administration, was the permissive uh, environment that was created that allowed so much to go completely unprosecuted, completely undeterred, and what have you, to right now where it's active, where they're actively trying to break be detrimental to our financial system and to our culture and to our country as a whole. Which is worse? I don't know. I mean, the thing is that everything that Trump isn't something that he invented, right? And I think that with that, we would both absolutely agree on this, that this has been a decades long process that has covered both Democratic and Republican administrations. that, horrible things have been pushed forward from both Democrats and Republicans to lead us to this moment in time that we're in today. I mean, if we were a healthier country that had managed our issues in a way that actually helped the regular people of this country and not just the billionaires, we would never have elected Trump. We would never put up, Joe Biden to run against him, nor Hillary, for that matter. I mean, I think that what we are experiencing now is just a culmination of what we as a citizenry have basically allowed to happen because either either we were misinformed, malinformed, or we decided not to be informed, and we didn't ask for more when elective politics could have been more positive for us. And now we're in a situation to where it's like, I hope there's a part of me that still hopes that we can somehow vote our way out of this. And I think that under the right circumstances, in the right way, perhaps that still is the case. But man, it's getting scary out there. And it's getting scary because of all the things that we and the people, more importantly, the people that we found to express, what's going on out there, the Bill Blacks of the world, and so forth, that they've been yelling and screaming from the rooftops for years. That if we had only listened, I mean, you think about the con, right? And we think about all of the whistleblowers that we highlighted, right? I mean, every single time, if they were only listened to, everything would have been different. If Mike Winston was listened to, if Dick Bowen was listened to, I mean, and on all the way through. Gary Aguirre, if he was listened to, I mean, it's the tragedy of the moment that we're in right now, with all the divisiveness, with all the yelling back and forth, and with us as an American people being so bifurcated, is that it didn't have to be this way. It never did. And why it takes so much, for people to listen. I mean, you go all the way back to biblical times, right? It's like, prophets are always dismissed. They're always trad upon, I mean, I'm not comparing this to prophets, but I'm just saying that people who have a dissident voice, who are always saying that, the life that's so comfortable to you has an extreme cost. And at some point, it's going to come back to bite us, are never welcomed. And, we're just part of a long tradition of people who have done that. I mean, think about some of our heroes, from, on my side, the Upton Sinclairs of the world, and on your side, the Hunter S. Thompsons of the world. I mean, that's exactly what they were all about, right? That's I mean, and it's just it's tragic that we have to get to such extreme circumstances before we do something positive.
Well, I mean, that's the genesis of our evolution, right? I mean, we are literal muckrakers. But the way I like to describe it is that, to your Hunter S. Thompson analogy, I always say that Donald Trump is the emperor's new clothes on bad acid. I mean, it's naked corruption, right? You can't look away. It's a train wreck every day.
Oh yeah.
We could go in the details of everything, but see, what's been so remarkable about us and where you're going with Corruption Incorporated is the only thing that Donald Trump ever said that might be construed as somewhat right, but of course skewed towards his manipulation of it because of the apparatus that he's in the midst of, right? Was this notion of fake media. Because you and I discovered that was really the impetus for us to go try to find these truths. And so after thousands of miles,
Absolutely.
a ton of energy, a ton of resources, more money than I care to even consider. But the fact is that we discovered that, and this is a shortcut, but the $90 billion a year apparatus of the Department of Justice, the FBI, the SEC, AGs around the country were not able to determine or discover really the continuity of the structure that we did. And I can assure you, we didn't have 10,000 employees and we didn't have billions and billions of dollars. What we had is who I like to refer to as Michelangelo, because when you start piecing these things together, it is complicated. But I like to say it's not rocket science, it's racketeering, right? So when we understand, and you have to kind of go to the ends of the earth and back to get the evidence. And that's why when you refer to Bill Black, for example, especially the theory, if you will, the whole apparatus of what we learned, which was control fraud, which of course led to over 5,000 executives going to prison as a result of the savings and loan crisis, which was pretty much the first act of everything we've been in since. But what we discovered, and what's so important about what you're doing now with Corruption Incorporated, is that everybody from top to bottom out there is talking about corruption finally. But they still, like what you and I learned long ago, they're digging in the wrong place. What is it that you are going to bring to the table by way of revealing the structure and the powerful voices? And what is your hope moving forward that audiences can really sink their teeth into, and what they're going to get from absorbing Corruption Incorporated?
Right, right. Okay, that's a big question. So hopefully I have an
Got six
answer.
minutes.
Okay, so 6 minutes. All right. Well, let's see. Well, the biggest thing is that I think that we can, through good data and good analyses brought to people by the greatest voices that are out there. Like I said, a great many of them, your audience is already familiar with, because you have been gracing them with these voices of wisdom, for a long time already. And so I'm trying to expand that audience, and then I'm also trying to kind of just to kind of go back a little bit. One of the things that made the con work was that you always looked at it from the macro, right? And from the macro and from the top down. And I tend to always look at it from the micro and from the grassroots up. And I think that it's fair to say that those two different approaches, which are so important to getting the whole truth, is what we have to offer with like this two-pronged attack of you doing what you're doing and me doing what I'm doing, where it's like my focus on corruption and my focus of the corrosive nature of it, my focus on the fact that we we have been, as a population, victimized by the manipulation of our government, our regulatory regimes, so many different things. Media amongst
Social media.
for sure, of which we're now a part, to hopefully be like some sort of oasis. Because I think that one of the things that we can do is that by bringing the voices that we're bringing, which unfortunately are not necessarily the voices that people are getting on much larger outlets that gets much more viewership, but hopefully we can change that, right? Because it's befuddling to me, and I know it's been to you because we've had these discussions before, where like, if you're trying to dissect the 2008 financial crisis, for instance, how could MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, or any of the other large media, even like some of the new media stuff, new media, boy, that's an ancient term, but some of the other things that are out there, how could they not go first to somebody like Bill Black, who was on the front lines of the savings and loan crisis? He and his compatriots were there, and not because the government was all that much help. They were part of the government, and they had to force their hand. They had to make it happen, with the powers that be, but they did. How do you not ask those people first? How do you not ask Paul Pelletier what's going on in the Department of Justice? How do you not ask Chris Swecker what's going on in the FBI? How do you not ask all these people who we are bringing to the population, the people who aren't just like there prognosticating, aren't just there like from a perspective where they are just watching from afar. No, the people that we're talking to are on the front lines or had been on the front lines. They know this inside and out because they lived it day in and day out. Those are the voices of wisdom that we can bring, and I think that the magic of this, once again, is that with what you've been doing for the past several years, the macro, the big, and bringing it down, right? And me with Corruption Inc. saying, okay, how is this like really affecting you, the average person, and then going up? That ability, if people are watching both our channels, I think you're going to get that. You're going to get that whole story, from top to bottom, bottom to top, of exactly what is going on the macro and how it's affecting you on the micro, and what can be done, in order to actually do something about it. But first things first, you have to have good data, and you have to have people who can synthesize that data, who actually know what they're talking about, and who don't have an agenda other than trying to make things better. Because so often, the people who are like picking and choosing their data points in order to create a narrative, they have an agenda, whether it's on the left or whether it's on the right, Democrat, Republican. I mean, it's tough to find, a fair arbiter. And I think that one thing that I can say that we are diligently trying to do is to bring that fair arbiter to, anybody who's willing to watch. And I think if people do, man, they're going to have a much clearer understanding as to this world. And if there's something that can be done about it, our combined efforts are going to, sure as I almost said an expletive there, our combined efforts are going to help make sure that they know what that is and that happens. I mean, right now, I think that people are squeezed more than they ever have been in living memory. Except for maybe there might be a few people who still, were alive during the Great Depression and so on and so forth. But outside of that, you know, we're in a universe right now where it's harder and harder to get by. And there's reasons for it. And perhaps more importantly, there's ways out of it if we can find the political will to make those things happen. And in the ability to find that political will has got to start from us, right? As a people, understanding what can be done, why it's worth doing, and then forcing people to do those things. I mean, you go back to Bill Black's, experience with the SNL crisis. Nobody was going to lift a finger until they embarrassed the hell out of them to such an extent that they had to. Now, whether we can just simply embarrass people or not, today people seem a little bit more shameless than they were back then, or whatever that leverage happens to be. We need to find that and make sure that they feel that, because things can be done. We know those things can be done. We have people who know how to do them. We just have to get the universe of people out there to be listening to the right voices. And I think that that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring people the right voices who know what's actually happening, who know how to do something about it. And I think if we do that, then we're at least giving ourselves a chance, and I can go to sleep at night. And I think, if anything, that's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to go to sleep at night knowing that when I'm gone, maybe I'm giving my daughter's world a better chance at being better for her.
Which is really cool because I remember when we were on our first lap around the country on our epic voyage prologue with our original, effort. You were inspired by your daughter's. I'm trying to remember the name of that teddy bear. What was the name of that teddy bear? Do you remember?
It was the dog. It was
It was Okay, sorry to put you on the spot, but it was so cool. But it was like your North Star at that time. Who were you? You were working for your daughter, but that's what was inspiring you to continue to do the impossible. And like Troy McClain used to say, you and I have been lockstep from the very beginning. What we're providing the people is what really the founders, I believe, created the First Amendment to do, to create an informed citizenry to hold power to account. which is where we came from, the journalistic background, which unfortunately has been destroyed by this monstrosity of corruption. And what I like to always say, in closing, and I think this speaks for both of us, considering the force, the dark side and the light side of the force, is that the universal truth, for however you want to quantify all other truths, be them faith or ideology or whatever else, and what we understand about the truth of a story, particularly as it relates to crime, is you have to have the evidence and the wherewithal to be able to disseminate it, to be able to bring the investigation that in a court of law creates indictments, and then if provided to the jury of the American people, hopefully to the tune of millions, that we can turn the light. I mean, turn the tables on the dark side of what we're all in the midst of. And what I always like to say is that the universal truth is that light overcomes darkness with the force of energy. And that when you live in light, you live in truth. When you live a lie, you're depraved. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. And when you lie inside, you die. And so what we're selling is the truth. And it's not theory, and it's not faith-based. It's the evidence based on years and years and years of being on what I call the righteous grind. And I'm just so proud that you're going to have this opportunity to have this incredible platform that I hope builds a network that I think might be what is the sum total of what our efforts have always been to try to get to this point, because God knows our country is desperate for it.
Well, we both have a lot of work ahead of us. So
what do people look for the Corruption Incorporated? Give us some more information about all things about how we can discover and understand what we're going to be, where to look, and then ultimately, kind of your hope in terms of sharing and that sort of thing.
you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. I think our handle is The Real Corruption, but we're also but we go under our the name of the channel is Corruption Inc., but I think it's at The Real Corruption. And you can find us there. We'll be opening up more avenues here in the near future, and we have like a lot of really fun and interesting surprises coming up in the coming months. So yeah, we're coming in a little bit behind you, but we're coming in hot, and we'll be fighting this fight side by side.
Ladies and gentlemen, Eric S. Vaughan, one of the greatest people I've ever met. And I know that together we're going to forge a lot of really great information through Corruption Incorporated. So thank you for your time, my man. All the best. And obviously, I'll be calling you soon. Thank you for your time.
All right. Take care.